Welcome to another episode of Inspirational People. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and today I get the privilege of introducing you to my longtime friend, John Lehmberg. John, say hello.
Hey,
Good to have you. John is a
good to
former
be.
John is a former pastor and the founder of Make It Loud Web Design, located in Buford, Georgia, and he's been operating it since 2004. His company provides marketing that gives businesses better decision-making insights and informed advice to grow their company. We originally met through the Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce a few years after I moved from Arizona to Atlanta. And over the years, with shared values and interests, particularly our Christian faith and Star Trek of all things, we became friends, sharing the burdens and celebrations of life and dissecting the many episodes that we both watched of Star Trek. So, John, thank you for joining us. Tell us about you, your story, and how Star Trek intersected with it.
Star Trek changed. So I had, I always told people I was the anti-entrepreneur. I never intended to start a business.
Yeah.
Um,
Just never was
I started,
interested, or you just thought you wouldn't be good at it?
it wasn't even on my radar. If you'd asked me 20 years ago and said, hey, you know what, you're gonna own a digital marketing agency and you're gonna be successful in that, and that's gonna pay the bills for you over the years, I would have thought you were absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
So my college degree was in youth ministry. I graduated from a school called Eastern College, which is now a university. And
And where is that located?
It's in St. David's, Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia.
Okay.
And I'd planned on spending my life in the ministry. I'd planned on spending my life in ministry. My degree was in youth ministry and history, of all things. And I took position in Orlando as soon as I graduated from college and was in youth ministry professionally from 1989 up until about 2003, beginning of 2004, and that was my full-time work. So I had absolutely no intention whatsoever of starting a business. Graphic design and digital marketing was not on my radar. I hadn't messed with Photoshop, and it probably wasn't around at the time. I was good with computers, but I really had absolutely no interest in the business world whatsoever.
Yeah.
In and around 2002 or 2003, I felt like God started messing with me about what was ahead, and was really interested in creating a house church kind of ministry. The church I had served in was a local mega church, and it had grown. I'd been through the process. When I got there, they were about 600 or 800 members, and then when I left, they were around 5. So I watched the church go from probably what might be larger than average to kind of mega church status over those years. And while I've got nothing negative to say about that model, it just kind of wasn't who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was more pastoral and more relational, and what as the church changed, my role changed, and I felt like I was becoming more administrative more than anything, and those were really not my giftings. So, so I started in on this house church thing, and house churches don't make money, so I had to go back and figure a way how to make money. I've been actually doing some mobile detailing to just put food on the table, and while I'd started the house church and detailed a guy's car who had a web design business. In fact, he's still in business as well.
Yeah.
And started to talk to me about that, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe I could do something like that. I'd messed with HTML a little bit back in the early days, and actually created a website for one of my youth staff. But I wouldn't have considered myself a professional at the time, and maybe there weren't a lot of those even at the time.
Yeah.
So started in and did it part-time, and within 6 months I had a full-time salary and was working the business and doing house churches all at the same time. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I got.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts there. First is, interesting enough, I am predicting that we're going to see the house church model come back in light of the pandemic. When large groups of people can't get together, I think it's going to be clusters of small. So that's interesting. But I'm curious. Go ahead.
Rethink church.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not going, by and large, they're not going in droves on Sunday morning for fear or whatever other reason. And you know, I've said this to you before in the past. You and I meet regularly, and that to me, and the honesty in our relationship is actually more a church moment than I think, and biblically more a church moment than perhaps going to church. What we church on Sunday mornings, where you stare at the back of somebody's head and don't interact really with anybody. So I think it's causing people to rethink what church really is. It causes them to rethink what's important to them and what's not. And you know, that can't, you know, as long as they stay true to the scriptures, that can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, I would agree. So I guess on that note, the other question I have is, you know, both you and I have had negative experiences with other Christians and in the church, but I would say that yours have been much more severe than mine ever have. So how did you stay connected to your relationship with God, where so many people that have that type of thing simply move on and say, you know what, God, I guess this didn't work out. I either don't believe in you or whatever the reasoning might be.
Well, there are a couple of things I think that happen. One is I've maintained cynicism about the organized church. Although I continue to go, and I have continued to make that a part of my life, and my church is actually still meeting on Sunday mornings, and I was there yesterday. So I maintain a pretty high level of cynicism about it. The other thing for me, and this perhaps goes back to 2002 and 2003. For me, wanting to do these house churches, in the mega church, we have what we call small groups, and they have these different schools of thought in small groups. You have a church of small groups, you have a church with small groups, and I would throw both of those out, and I would say church is small groups. So for me, the church organized, I think, became less important to me, and the church relationally became more important to me. And I think that's how I've managed to stay connected. You know, I have a, you know, the cultural buzzword we use now is tribe. I have a tribe, of which I can't thank you enough for being a part of that, and listening to me bleed, and caring and loving and challenging and all of that over the years. And there are others who've helped me do that. And I think that's really what's helped me stay connected to Christianity and my faith over the years more than anything. I couldn't have done without it. I really couldn't have.
Yeah.
So the negativity from the organized church over the years, even negativity towards building house churches, you know, when I even started that, I had a pastor I knew who was pastoring a mega church. He said, look, you know, I'd be all for it if you can collect money. I'm like, really? Is that kind of all that? Is that why we don't do house church? So, you know, and so it was negative there from the beginning. And I think the organized church is not very good at dealing with real life issues in people.
Especially if it's not inside of what's maybe more normal or more common.
There's a bandwidth, right, in which it operates, and if you fall outside of that bandwidth for whatever reason, and people do for a variety of things, the church, I don't think, is so good at dealing with people like that. And there's no real if church is just showing up on Sunday morning and watching a guy speak and then walking out and never really knowing somebody, then there's no relationship even to anchor them. There's there's no friendship to. Yeah,
it can become very consumer or self-oriented.
Yeah, it's kind of the difference between a doctor making a house call and going to the hospital. It's where a doctor who makes a house call, you have a personal relationship with and pays attention intently what's going on with you because he cares. And that in that type of business model, there were doctors who met with families for decades, and he was in the house and hands-on cared for people. Now, if you go to a doctor's office or you go to a hospital, they file you in by some number, and you're really more a number than you are anything else.
Yeah.
Not that those are bad, but it's a different kind of
Yeah.
service. So
Yeah. So how did you end up doing the business and the house church? How did that evolve after you started to grow the business? How did that morph over time?
I did, and there were different kind of vestiges. There were seasons of life where I did house church for about 5 years. Then I returned actually to full-time ministry for a bit, for about 6 months, turned the business over to some friends. And then actually that ministry position didn't work out so well for us. So I came back to it. You know, there are different seasons of ministry for me. I started with house church. We did that for 5 years. I felt like it had kind of run its course and actually never really became what I envisioned. And then I went back into full-time ministry and set Make It Loud aside for about 6 months. That didn't fly. And then came back and worked Make It Loud full-time and worked in ministry part-time beyond that.
Yeah.
And did that till about 5 years ago. So I was actually youth pastoring until about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
And so I guess you, in the last 5 years, go ahead.
As the business grew and it took more of my time, it made sense, honestly. I felt like I was getting too old for youth ministry anyways, in some respects. I know there are youth pastors who are my age and older and who continue to go do it. But for me, I just didn't feel like I didn't feel like I had the same kind of connection with the kids that I had in earlier years, and maybe even didn't understand so much. So I headed back into working Make It Loud full time and trying to make it grow.
Yeah. So that brings us to this today and this year, and we're in the middle of a cascading series of crises, started with health, economic, and then social unrest, and we can definitely debate about the severity of it and the severity of how we should respond to it. But how do we wisely navigate this, especially as Christians? What does that look like, and how do we frame it so that you said you're a history major, that there's a lot of history of trouble, much worse than what we're facing. So what are your thoughts?
I'll call them guiding principles. I think, let me say this first, that it's easy to make rational decisions and right decisions when there's an abundance of truth. I'm college graduated, you're college graduated, and I'm not sure, with respect to some of the crises around us, that the truth is so evident. I think it's very hard to find it. I think it's very hard to discover it. Everybody seems to have some kind of spin and yet declares they have the truth. So COVID's going to kill so many people, or maybe it's not going to kill so many people, and you need to wear a mask. No, you don't need to wear a mask. It's very hard to go navigate any of these crises. I think because of the spin of who is reporting. And I'm old enough to have grown up in a different day, in the days of Walter Cronkite and journalists who I think sought to not have spin. And I don't know that that's so possible today. What we get is media enhanced and is politically driven and is not. I think it's just hard to find. It's hard to discover the truth, and because of that, you have people in very different camps and in very different places, and the only thing I know to do is to try to provide understanding and respect for anyone who makes decisions based on the information that they have. And I personally believe that you can come up on either side of that. I should wear a mask. I shouldn't wear a mask. We're going to be fine. No, we're not. School should open. School shouldn't. You can wind up on either side of that fence and be intelligent and have sought out answers and spent time to discover the truth. And ultimately, it's so hard to find it that when you can, in some respects, I think people are guessing. Well, I think this seems right to me, and they follow a course of action, and you have to respect people for that. So if they want to wear a mask, when somebody comes in and make it loud, if they're wearing a mask, I ask them if they want me to put one on, if they feel more comfortable, and I keep one nearby.
Yeah.
So, and I try to provide understanding, and I try to just love people through this, because there's no other way. Everybody matters to the Lord, and everybody matters, and everybody should matter to those around them. I've got opinions, you have opinions, everybody's got opinions about how this is going to unfold or have unfolded. And I will say this, I have pretty well severed my ties with the television, news, and anything media related. I just found it sensationalist, and I found it of no value, and I found it overwhelming and constantly overwhelming. And it was so contradictory. I'm like, you know what, this is not adding value to my life. So for me, there's been a departure from it. There's been a departure from Facebook as well, particularly as it's become more political, and it's more filled with hate and animosity from the masked and the not masked, and the Democrats and the Republicans. I just don't have time. I don't have time to go live in that story. So I've really cut the cord on that for me, to make sure that I maintain my own peace internally.
So I guess the thing that comes to my mind as you describe that, as both followers of Jesus, I think we come across people that have a similar experience with truth, like what's in terms of faith and religion. They might be looking, well, why are there so many religions? How do I know which one's true? There's so many, how do I know God is personal or not? How do I even know there is a God? I mean, all the suffering, maybe there isn't. And so I see in what you're describing as an interesting parallel to our walk. And so I don't know, do you see that as well? And what do you make of it?
I think so. I mean, everybody makes decisions, whether it's Christianity or whatever religion you choose to fill in the blank with. Everybody makes decisions based on what they think is true.
Yeah.
And spiritually speaking, you bank your life on that in some respects. I guess with COVID too, at least in the here and now, you're making decisions, and you're kind of banking your life on that. Okay, this mask is going to protect me. Isolation will protect me. Or maybe I need to be out there and I need to get it, and that will protect me. Or I need to protect my children. So you get kind of in this protection mode, but ultimately it's about life saving, life preservation, and discovering the truth, and you bank your life on that truth is what's most important. Yeah. And
well, I guess that it makes me wonder though, is are we outsourcing truth seeking too much? In other words, we're expecting people to tell us the truth instead of really doing the hard work of figuring it out.
I couldn't agree more. Even in Christianity, there's so many Christian books written. Go read your Bible.
Yeah.
Let God speak to you through His Word, instead of taking somebody else's opinion, which may or may not be right, anyways. Yeah. And I know for COVID, I've had to go do that. I've had to go seek out places where I think data lies, where I think truth lies, and I've made my decisions based on those sorts of things. Others have different sources of data and different sources of truth, and they're banking on that as well. I don't know that most people are taking that time. I think it's just easier to turn on channel 11 and say, "Oh, there it is," and have somebody give it to you, when it really there's so many other factors involved in it. It may very well not be truth at all. And interestingly enough, the best kind of lie is one that's only 1% lie. It's very, very easy to come up with something that 90% of it looks true, and well, sure, it seems right, but that 10% kind of still makes it off. And my dad, when I was younger, there were these Dove soap, was it Dove? Ivory soap commercials.
Ivory. Okay, yeah.
They had, and I can remember watching one of these commercials, and their tagline was kind of always the same: 99 point X number percent pure, right? as that commercial was going on, I remember my dad coming in, and he'd watched the commercial as well. And he said, yeah, but if that 0.75% is the wrong stuff, it'll kill you.
Yeah.
So, to me, it kind of sums up my experience with trying to discover things through the media and other people. I've had to go do that for myself. And I just try to respect what people come up with.
Yeah. So I guess,
same what's most true.
Yeah. So I guess as when you think about living, what does it mean then to live well? What does that mean to you? How do you define that? How do you look at it? How do you live that out?
You and I are perhaps in different seasons of life. You've got itty bitties around the house, and mine are daddy buddies. So the kids are all gone, and I'm 53, and thinking about the days ahead and the days behind, and what it means to live life well. Part of that for me is coming up with something work-wise that I think I can live in long-term and sustain, and is life filling instead of taking away. And there are pieces of, I think, what I do now that really fit that bill. There are others that don't. And I want to operate in a sweet spot part of that for myself. The best kind of work is something you enjoy doing, regardless whether you get paid for it or not. And if you enjoy what you're doing, it doesn't ever feel like a job. So the last season, or the last seasons of my life, I want to be living in that. I want to take time for relationships, whether it's family or friends. I want that to be most important. I want, the vestige of authentic church to be most important for me as well. And for me, that's living better. Some of that also is having more margin in life. I think on the whole, perhaps real church and real relationships don't happen so often and so frequently because there's so little margin. People are so busy that they don't have time for each other, and I would like to have that time.
So tell me more about that margin and the problem that we have, and what the benefit is of cultivating it.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I mean, when my kids were growing up and they were littler, the thing that used to drive me nuts was school sports and things like that, because it occupied so much time, and so much of the family's resources were focused on those kinds of things. We had to even set limits with our kids about what they could or couldn't do. You do one thing, and that was because we valued other things that were also important. And if that one thing or two things took up all of our time, then we were not getting to the things that we were so important. So I think the same is true in life right now. It's determine what's important to you, and make sure it's got space in your life. Not only that, there are those that would schedule every moment, and I'm just not wired like that. I never have been.
What motivates someone to do that?
There are plenty of reasons for that. Personality can be one. People, there are people who are more scheduled than spontaneous. In the Myers-Briggs, that's the J versus the P. The J's are scheduled and they want to make the most of every moment, so they schedule everything. And then the P's kind of are more about margin, and I'll take life as it comes. And that to me, or to them, is living life better. For me, I like for there to be space. I like for there to be downtime, for life to happen, for a friend to call and spontaneously say, hey, can you help me with this? Because if those are always no's, then I'm not being relationally such a great friend either, and I'm not connected real well. I think with others. I prefer for there to be enough margin in life. In recent years, I've done a lot more camping, and been out in places where I can kind of feel God, leave the concrete jungle and go park my VW bus in the woods somewhere, sit around the campfire with a friend, and enjoy some time together. And those are the kinds of things where you get space to sit, you get space verse. You know who talked about this well was Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David. They were they did an episode. It's hilarious. One, they love VWs, and I love VWs, so they were driving this beautiful car, and they were having, you know, commuting cars getting coffee is the name of the show. If you want to go look it up, it's a fantastic episode. And Seinfeld was talking about how they'd create these episodes, and he said, you know, I'd come into the office in your office and say, you know, I had an idea, but we could never do a show about that. And then 2 weeks later, you'd written a show about that, and we wound up doing it. And it was hilarious to sit and watch them. And he said, he put up his feet and he said, you know, you always had these cigars. And he says, do you still smoke cigars? And Larry David goes, I don't do that anymore. I don't smoke cigars anymore. He says, you're just always full of wisdom. You know, we'd sit back with a couple of cigars and we'd smoke and spend some time. And he said, you know, it's a very different experience from smoking cigarettes. He goes, you know, cigarettes are, it says you're rushed. You don't have time. And he goes, cigars are contemplative. You have to take a couple of hours. You're opening your mind, he says, to other thoughts. And it would not occur to you. You're taking the time to go do that. And Jerry's going, oh yes, it's the contemplative thing. That's what the cigar is all about. And the same is true of life. I think you need to take the time to go enjoy it as a cigar instead of as a cigarette, where most people are going and just running from one thing to the next, and at the end of the day, just collapsing on their bed, having no time or energy for their spouse or their kids, for that matter. It's figuring out a way to be able to take that time and decompress.
So that contextualizes life. You know, when you think about work, you know, how do you work smarter so that you can, one, enable that, but also so you're not inconsistent in terms of going crazy at work, but living a contemplative life at home?
Yeah, well, when possible, I think it's higher for your businesses. One of the wisest things I think I ever read or heard was a guy who said, instead of building your weaknesses, take the time to build your strengths. There are a couple things, Jason, I'm just never going to be good at. I'm not ever going to be a good basketball player. I'm 5'9", and I have no vertical anything. And at this stage of the ball game, no amount of practicing is going to make me this great basketball player. Nor am I ever going to be an accountant. I'd rather make money than count it. And me taking the time to go turn me into an accountant, which would be helpful, I guess, in some ways, perhaps, for the business, but that's not my bag. Mm-hmm. And when you sit back and kind of learn who you are and what you're great at and what you're not great at, I would say where you can spend your time doing the things you're great at, that will leverage more for your business than anything else. And where you can hire out where possible, through a VA or a minion, whatever you want to call it. When you hire that stuff out that you're not great at, that you don't want to go do, that is not liking to you, go and do that where possible. It's not always, there are financial realities and everything, So how do you, as a business grows, I think, you start more being a generalist, and as time goes on, hopefully you start more being a specifist. Mm-hmm. You're actually doing more things that are like you instead of 100 things that are like you. Yeah.
So I guess the question I would have for that is, how do you differentiate or reconcile maybe those weaknesses or deficiencies that are a part of a role that is necessary when you're leading people? Mm-hmm. So you may not go to be a good web designer, so you can outsource that to a good web designer, right? You may not be good at SEO, so you outsource that. But what if it's communication or structure or things that as a leader those are weaknesses. How do you reconcile the difference between kind of a technical thing that you're just not good at that you need to outsource versus a leadership trait that you'll need to lead those people you're delegating to?
You certainly want to try and grow those areas as well, especially if they're necessary for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, John Maxwell said, I can make anybody a leader, but if you got the gift of leadership, you might be a 10 when, you apply wisdom and understanding and training to that, and you might be a level 10 leader. He says, I can take somebody who's not gifted and make them a 7, but they're not probably ever going to be a 10, because that's an area of gifting. So you can still build your strengths, but build them wisely. Build the things necessary more than anything else. So that's what I would tell you in those particular scenarios. I mean, there are things that you just can't get away from, check writing, you can, maybe you can't.
Well, so on that, I guess on that note, I mean, he talks about elevating people's level of leadership. What does mentoring mean to you? How important is it? Should we care?
Should we care? Absolutely. I don't see a lot of it, unfortunately. I've always thought that kind of people older than myself didn't value it so much. And if the questions that older folks kind of ask were more about what I do instead of who I am, I think there are generational shifts there. My generation down, we're asking the question, who am I? And mentoring can help you cover that. I think that life on life thing, having somebody who's gone before you to help navigate the waters for you, is just priceless if you can find it. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't know that it's so available sometimes. I wish it were far more available. And I'm also not sure sometimes it's something you can structure in. Mm-hmm. It's not. Again, it's the difference between kind of setting a schedule and just running it, and then kind of organically happening between people. Mm-hmm. There are young people I'm still to this day, although I'm not a youth pastor, trying to invest my life in. Mm-hmm. I taught one of them how to drive stick shift yesterday in preparation for a motorcycle class he was taking today. Yeah. And continuing to try to go do that and build into others who are younger. I'd love to see more of that. I think it's immensely valuable, especially if the person doing the mentoring feels a burden to go do it and has just love for the younger person, and the younger person also has love and affection for the older. I think it can be really fantastic.
Yeah. So how does that tie? Yeah. So how does that tie into discipleship?
I think, in some respects, it's the best part of it. It's life on life. We kind of throw that word around the church. Again, you throw that word around the church, and somebody's discipled when they've gone through some training program, and I don't know that that's a fact. Jesus spent time, and the majority of his time in his profession, his ministry, with 12 guys, and pouring his life and doing life and letting the experiences of life happen and trying to debrief with them what was taking place. And it was all far more organic than it seemed to be anything else. Jesus kind of had a passion for the guys and said, let's go. Yeah. And let's go. Like he just knew that these guys were the people he was meant to go invest his life in, him being God. Yeah. I mean, that was the case, but I'd love to see more of that. And I think discipleship is more about life on life than anything else. I think we disciple people into faith. I don't know if discipleship starts when you initiate faith in Jesus. I think for most people, it started before. Yeah. If you look at the scriptures, where I think it's Peter, Jesus asked him and says, "Who do you say I am?" And he says, "Well, you're the Messiah." And Jesus makes a big deal of this. And he says, no man gave you that. He said, He said, God gave that to you. Like it was some kind of protected and beautiful information.
Mm-hmm.
And here, Jesus calls the disciples. That would be their place. You're the Messiah. They're acknowledging, probably for the first time verbally, that Jesus was the Savior. And Jesus calls that out and makes that a big deal. But Jesus had invested in them. This was toward almost before he was crucified. He'd invested almost 3 years of his life in them at that point in time. So he discipled into faith and didn't just disciple them once they had some faith.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to see people approach that with their friends and neighbors, and understand that relationships with others like that can be discipling kinds of relationships and spiritually beneficial. When I was doing student ministry, we did this survey. So I did this application with some kids. We were going on a mission project, and it only takes so many kids, so we had an application process. And one of the questions I asked the students was, how did you become a believer in Jesus Christ? How did you become a Christian? And all of the answers were the same, every single one, except for one. And we took 25 people. So the one person said, we did an altar call, and I came down and I just knew I was going to be a Christian, and it happened right there. And you'd figure from the way the church has historically done ministry here in the United States, at least, that's how people become Christians. Somebody, a pastor does an altar call, or somebody raises a hand, and it kind of happens like that. And the story, the application told a very different story. And I think it's actually the same story of Jesus. And it was, well, I came to church because a friend of mine invited me. They invited me out, and I came because of that. And I wanted to meet some people too. So, there's a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it was. I thought that might be a great place. And I came to meet people. And then I started to listen. And I continued to have conversation. And as I was listening, one day I realized I was kind of listening for me. Mm-hmm. And then another day I realized excuse me, and not only was I listening for me, but I really kind of wanted to hear more. And then one day I realized I kind of believed what the guy was saying. And then one day I realized that, and I said something about it. And there's this process that took place, much of it very relational. And I credit the relationship actually more than I do the guy teaching, who may very well have been myself through much of it. And it was organic, and it took time, and it took an investment, and it took love, and it took friendship, and it took all of these things kind of come together to bring a person down this path until they understood something true about Jesus, rather than hey, here's a great message, respond to it. And in the church in our world, perhaps those moments are even manufactured and manipulated. So
I guess, how does that correlate to being an entrepreneur and a business owner, or does it?
I have no idea.
In terms of leading other people.
Well, I think you have to invest in others if you want your team to be better. I applied for a ministry position, and this will probably sound ridiculous, but I'm going to say it anyways. I applied for a ministry position about 15 years ago.
Sometime in the past.
Really had. And it was in a church I'd actually served in before. Okay. And I didn't know the pastor of the church at the time, but when I sat with him, he was just this sage. He just dripping with Jesus and wisdom and life, and in his early 60s, and his name was Bruce. And we had lunch together, just the two of us, in towards the end of the interviews, when there were lots of them with different boards and staff and all that. And this one was kind of private. We were sitting together, and Bruce said to me, he says, you know something, over the years, I've learned something. I don't hire people I don't like. and I really like you, and I want to hire you. And I think it sounded ridiculous to me at the time, but I think there's actually more wisdom in it, because it's that affinity that I was talking about when you talk about discipling relationships or mentoring relationships. He felt compelled to be a part of my life. And I think if we approached employees more like that, we'd probably have a better experience with them than perhaps we have.
Yeah.
So you're not investing them relationally in some kind of way. If you can't build a friendship, people will take bullets for you if you're their friend. And there's a culture of friendship, a culture of relationship. It's a far messier way to go, without question. But relationships are messy, and life is messy too. Mm-hmm. So I think you get people's best work out of them when you have those kinds of relationships, and whatever business you're in, you're fostering those kinds of relationships too. Yeah. So it's not dissimilar from church and ministry work in Christianity, I think, in some respects. That's what people want. Yeah. I think a lot of times it's not, anybody can be taught a skill, right? And you can teach anybody a skill. You can teach them to count. You can teach them to keep your books. You can teach them to do whatever. The stuff that often hinders them is personal life stuff. If you can get to some of that and help people personally, I think you will see their skills increase, and you'll see their performance get better in the days ahead. They're in an environment of trust. If they're in an environment of family, that Make It Loud is strive to be very familial, and we continue to do that regularly. Yeah. So,
well, let's shift gears a little bit. Tell me how have real and/or fictional stories or narratives shaped you as a person, or what are some that stick out as ones that have?
Good or bad ones?
You could go both, either direction.
The fictional character I have probably most identified with is
Captain Luke Picard or Kirk.
Oh.
I failed.
Yeah, you really did. Probably Captain Kirk. Yeah. I'm a Star Trek purist, although I like the other two. I love the character. You want to talk about relationship, you see it there. I personally think that Star Trek is actually a whole lot more like Christianity than anything else. You know, you got God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, kind of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And it's always been said that Spock and McCoy is this battle between logic and emotion, and they verbalize what's going on inside of Kirk. He has a decision to make. He has a dilemma, and he has to figure out what to go do. They verbalize the tension in his mind to help him make a decision. All in the context of friendship. Interestingly enough, too, that there's a lot of forgiveness in that show for when people make really stupid mistakes. Kirk himself as well. And to me, it's beautiful. I love to see that. Actually, I think the better leadership show is Star Trek Voyager, though.
Mm-hmm. Captain Janeway.
Yeah, Janeway. Although I don't kind of identify with her in the same kind of way I identify with Kirk. I think if you want to go learn about leadership, Star Trek Voyager is a master's course in solid leadership, in solid friendship. And track it through the 8 years, and taking two different teams of people that are not quite enemies, but they're not really friends either. In fact, want nothing to do with each other, and being forced to be put together in the same crew, being alone in their environment and being far away from home, and having to make something of that for a purpose. That show it really is, if you trace it from beginning to end. There's a scene in the end of the show where you have 8 people or so on the crew, and the character Harry Kim, they're talking about trying to get home. They're far away from home. They're trying to get home, and they have this opportunity, and they have a decision to make. Do we try and take this shortcut and risk something, or do we go the long way? And Harry Kim makes this beautiful speech, and he says, if we've got to go further and take the long way for integrity's sake, I couldn't think of a group of people that mean more to me, and a group of people I would want to go do my life with than the people here in this room. And to take that from two separate groups of people who were opposed, and then 8 years later, there's this beauty in relationship, and you see it week by week, episode by episode, where there's far more conflict up front, and them trying to work through some of these conflicts together, inside and outside. There are pressures externally and internally, and winding up with team, and winding up with leadership, and winding up with friendship, and winding up with respect and humanity. That's the show to watch. It is a complete master's degree course in leadership. So I think it's quite definitely helped me.
Yeah. So on the flip side, stories shape us, but also systems shape and inform us. So how do you think about systems, and how do you use them in your life and work?
I'm poor at them. It's one of my deficiencies in my not being so organized or administratively minded, like I confessed to you up front. I think my battle has been the systems I created up front. What was initially your solution later on becomes your problem. So they continue to take evaluation on my part to make sure that we're continuing to have the right tool for the right job and at the right time. My business has changed. It continues to change. It continues to evolve. It's more competitive. Some of the things we do now are not do not have the same priority that they had 10 years ago, even in the digital world. Digital changes daily. You have to keep your head in that game, and it requires constant maintenance. And I think our systems require that same maintenance.
So how has the pandemic, like as a digital company, there's some advantages that I imagine you have, but also being a retail store, you also have some of the disadvantages. So how are you looking at it and through those uniquely polarizing lenses?
Interesting. It's made me question whether or not we continue to need the retail space. And the truth is, people continue to walk through our doors oftentimes and still, even during the pandemic, I wanted somebody I could talk to. I wanted somebody I could see. I wanted somebody whose hand I could shake, or fist bump, or elbow bump, or whatever it is in this environment. There's more. Interestingly, it parallels, I think, our conversation earlier. There's more room for a lack of truth. The more digital it is, and the further removed you are from somebody face to face, the more room there is for error and for somebody to deceive you. And a lot of the clients that we have been deceived. Are just out a lot of money before they ever walk through the door, and they recognize the value of what we provide. But at the same time, they need the handshake. They need the relationship. I still have my first client from 15 years ago. And a lot of our clients have stayed with us over the years. There are some I've done 3, 4, 5 websites for, redesigns over the years.
Yeah.
So I'm questioning, even during the pandemic, do we need retail space? But people at the same time continue to walk through the door and say, look, I'm looking for you. I'm looking for a place. I'm looking for somebody I can sit with. Just the other day, in the middle of the pandemic, somebody came in and had a conversation with me, and 70 to 80% of the people that walk through the door have the same story. I got screwed, and I'm out $3,000 to $5,000, which, put in perspective, is some car, right? I'm out that money, and I still need your services, but I need somebody who's going to do it and be credible at it. So I have decisions to make every single year, whether or not we're going to kind of stick it out in the retail space or not. The tools are such these days, we can work with anybody in the United States, anywhere. Zoom, you and I are communicating over Zoom, although we only live probably about 7 miles apart. And I can do that, and we can do that through email, and and any of the conversations we have can be done over the telephone. We can serve somebody remotely as well, as we can somebody close by. But I think in the current environment, there's a ton of fraud in digital marketing. People just wanting to take your money. There's a hosting company that had a product that was supposed to drive for $69 a month. Is supposed to drive traffic to your website, and come to show what they're doing is they're buying for $69 a month. They're buying $30 worth of pay-per-click and pocketing $39 and selling this product to millions. I mean, they're making all kinds of money on this, but there's absolutely no return on that product whatsoever. $30 of pay-per-click money, you might as well just drive down the road and throw that $30 out the window. It is of no value whatsoever to you. And if anybody ever got a call from that, I would be absolutely shocked. It just does not recover. And again, hard to discern the truth when you got this environment of potential for fraud. So, and you see it, you see it on Facebook, you see it everywhere. So I think that's made our storefront more relevant, perhaps even now than ever. At the same time, for us, it's a lot of money, but it continues to be something, at least right now, that continues to be worthy of our investment.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to do it.
Yeah. Well, what other words of wisdom would you share with us today? Things you've learned on your own journey in life.
Pray a lot. People have asked what the secret to business is for me, and it really is prayer. Getting on my knees and just asking God for the next thing. Asking God to take care of situations. And He's more close than far away. No matter what your situation in life, whether you're struggling in this, you're struggling as a Christian, whether you're struggling in your home or in your marriage or in your family or with your kids, God is near. And that's the thing to remember. You don't have to do life on your own. Because
I guess
God,
in a society like ours, it is very much about like kind of lift yourself up from your bootstraps, autonomy, independence. I got to do this myself. So I think for many people that, go ahead.
Yeah. I if you've not reached this place in life, where you need help other than what you can go deliver for yourself, you will get there. There in my life where I could not do without others around me or without relationship with God. I couldn't do without it. And I think you get to this place in life where you go, I don't know what the heck else to go do. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right. And there's a need to, and ultimately it has to come from, some other means, whether somebody steps in to help you and you have a spiritual friend who would bring health to you, and life and help you, or whether God Himself steps in. If you're not to the point yet where you go, I can't fix this. And COVID particularly, I can't fix this. I can't fix its impact on my business. I would like to be able to do that. I would love to be able to sit here and give 5 tricks to go make your business work during COVID, where you just blink them. And I don't have that. I don't have it. I don't know what's.
So how do we, I think part of what you're alluding to is letting go. How do we learn to let go?
Probably the hard way. There's probably a lot of worry on that path, for most people, a lot of fear on that path. And at the first, I'll just getting kind of transparent. I mean, the first 2 weeks of COVID, my being a history major did not help me. Because in my head, I'm going Great Depression, Great Depression, Great Depression, Great Depression. And you know what? It might be. I don't think we've seen the impact necessarily economically yet. Our government hasn't stopped printing money. So So that may yet come. I have no idea, and maybe it won't. But for the first 2 weeks, I was a bundle of nerves and just panic stricken, and thought, okay, well, what would I do without this company? What would I do if I didn't have this? How would I go make money? How am I going to go provide for my family? How am I going to go put kids through college and sustain that for the next couple of years through all of this? And your mind can run through all of this stuff. And it's like God said, stop. I care for you, and that's got to be enough. And you just got to let it go in order to move on. And that's what I've had to go do. Otherwise, I'm just, again, a bundle of nerves and immobile at that. Mm-hmm. And that's no, especially when in the environment, you have to make real and very, very hard decisions. We had to let people go.
Yeah.
And it's horrible to have to go do those things, but those right decisions only come with some right thinking too. And I needed to have some right thinking, and being caught up in all of the stuff that's going on does not make it easy to go make right decisions. So you have to set it, trust that there's a God in the universe and that he cares. And for those things that you can't fix, trust him and kind of let it go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that would be my only words of wisdom.
Yeah. Well, what else would you share with us? Anything you wanted to share that didn't get a chance to? Thoughts?
Not that I can think of. Not that I can think of. I guess the only other thing I would say is this, and this has probably been a lesson from the last 15 years. Your life very well may not turn out how you think. If you told me 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, that I'd be in the situations that I'm in the work I'm in, I would have absolutely no idea. If you'd asked me, I thought I'd still be in professional and full-time ministry, that I would retire there, and even some days there's still a desire to go do that. And at the same time, you got to go, okay, this path I walk is not just mine, because sometimes life just doesn't turn out how you expect, and you have to make lemons or you have to make lemonade out of lemons. And mm-hmm. what you think it should look like, or what you wanted it to look like, despite your best efforts. And there are places in life you can work as hard as you can and still lose. Mm-hmm. And those are the tough places. Those are the places that require a God to step in and go, okay, you're going to have to make sense of this, because I can't. This is not what I wanted. This is not what I thought would take place. This is not what I thought my life would look like at 53 versus when I was 20 and had these ambitions and aspirations. And if I could have kind of taken a pen and written out what my story would have looked like, this is not it. This is not it. Whether it becomes what I hope or not is up to God. If not, I have to live one day at a time. I have to take what's in front of me and try to make the most of it and make the next right decision, and go from there. And it can overwhelm you when things don't work out as you expect, or mm-hmm. when you're disappointed. And those are the places where you got to go, okay. And I do this routinely. Okay, God, I don't know, not only not how to fix this. This is not where I want it to be, but I'm going to have to trust you anyways, that it's going to be okay. And that's probably the ways I say most in my head. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. God will make this okay. Somehow, some way, it's going to be okay. And if you're in that position right now, there are people out there who may not know it's going to be okay today. Your position may be ending. Your marriage may be coming unglued. Whatever it might be, somehow, some way, God will make it okay. And you have to trust him for that. Mm-hmm. It's the only thing I can tell you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. if people are interested in working with you or checking you out, where can they find you on social media online?
Yeah, Make It Loud Digital Marketing online on Facebook. You can find us on the web at makeitloud.net. If you want to come by and visit. I'm sitting in front of the storefront right now. So 2028 Buford Drive, Suite 300, Buford, Georgia. If you want to reach out to us by phone, 678-325-4007. And my extension is 102, or John at makeitloud.net. So
Cool.
lots of ways to
Now,
be in touch.
LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook.
Believe it or not, I'm not kind of so much a LinkedIn guy. I'm more on Facebook than anything else. So I'm the only John. Actually, there are two of us. I think I'm John Robert Lehmberg on Facebook, but there are only two John Lehmbergs on it. So if you type that in,
Okay.
you'll find me.
Okay.
Lehmber. So
Okay.
yeah, I care more than any other place socially.
Okay. Cool. Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much for sharing.
My pleasure. Glad to. Thanks for having me.